You can argue about whether or not an interpretation is valid, just like you can argue about whether your interpretation of a novel or movie is valid, right? It's a very difficult thing to determine with any degree of accuracy, which counts in part for the postmodern critique. But my observation has been that people will present a dream and sometimes we can extract out real useful information from it that the person didn't appear to know. And they get a flash of insight, and to me that's a marker that we've stumbled on something that unites part of that person that wasn't united before. It pulls things together, which is often what a good story will do, or sometimes a good theory. Things snap together for you and there's a little light goes on, and that's one of the markers that I've used for accuracy in dreams. And I know in my own family, when I was first married, I'd have fights with my wife, arguments about this and that. And I'm fairly hot-headed, and so I'd get all puffed up and, agitated about whatever we were arguing about, and she'd go to sleep, which was really annoying, so annoying. Because I couldn't sleep, right? I was like chewing off my fingernails, and she'd be like sleeping peacefully beside me. It's like maddening. So, but often she'd have a dream, and then the next morning she'd discuss it with me, and then we could unravel what was at the bottom of our argument. And that was unbelievably useful, even though it was extraordinarily aggravating. So I was convinced by Jung. It looked to me like his ideas about the relationship between dreams and mythology and drama and literature made sense to me, and the relationship between that and art. I know this native carver, he's a Kwakwaka'wakw guy. He's carved a bunch of wooden sculptures, totem poles, and masks that I have in my house. And he's a very interesting person, not literate, not particularly literate, and really still steeped in this ancient 13,000-year-old tradition. He's an original language speaker. And the fact that he isn't literate has sort of left him with the mind of someone who's pre-literate. And pre-literate people aren't stupid, they're just not literate, so their brains are organized differently in many ways. And I've asked him about his intuition for his carvings, and he's told me that he dreams, like you've seen the Haida masks, you know what they look like. Well, his people are closely related to the Haida, so it's the same kind of style. He said he dreams in those animals and can remember his dreams, and he also talks to his grandparents who taught him how to carve in his dreams. Quite often, if he runs into a problem with carving, his grandparents will come and he'll talk to them, but he sees the creatures that he's going to carve living in an animated sense in his imagination. And I mean, it's not that difficult. First of all, I have no reason to disbelieve him. He's a very, very straightforward person, and he doesn't have the motivation or the guile, I would say, in some sense, to invent a story like that. There's just no reason he would possibly do it. I don't think he's told that many people about it. He thinks it's kind of crazy, He said when he was a kid, he thought he was insane because he'd had those dreams all the time about these creatures and so forth. And so it wasn't something he was trumpeting. But I found it fascinating because I can see in him part of the manifestation of this unbroken tradition. We have no idea how traditions like that are really passed along for thousands and thousands of years, right? Part of it's oral and memory, part of it's acted out and dramatized, and then part of it's going to be imaginative. And people who aren't literate, they store information quite differently than we do. We don't remember anything. It's all written down in books, right? But if you're from an oral culture, especially if you're trained in that way, you have all of that information at hand, both so you can speak it, you can tell the stories, and you really know them. And modern people don't really know what that's like anymore. I doubt if there's more than maybe 2 of you in the audience that could spout from memory like a 30-line poem. And poetry was written so that people could do that. That's why we have that form, is so that people could remember it and have it with them. And we don't do any of that anymore. Anyways, back to Jung. Jung was a great believer in the dream, and I noted that dreams will tell you things that you don't know. And then I thought, well, how the hell can that be? How in the world can something you think up tell you something you don't know? How does that make any sense? First of all, why don't you understand it? Why does it have to come forth in the form of the dream? It's like there's something going on inside you that you don't control, right? The dream happens to you just like life happens to you. I mean, there is the odd lucid dreamer who can, apply a certain amount of conscious control, but most of the time you're laying there asleep and this crazy, complicated world manifests itself inside you, and you don't know how, you can't do it when you're awake, and you don't know what it means. It's like, what the hell's going on? And that's one of the things that's so damn frightening about the psychoanalysts, because you get this both from Freud and Jung, you really start to understand that there are things inside you that are happening that control you instead of the other way around. You know, there's a bit of reciprocal control, but there's manifestations of spirits, so to speak, inside you that determine the manner in which you walk through life. And you don't control it. And what does? Is it random? You know, there are people who have claimed that dreams are merely the consequence of random neuronal firing, which is a theory I think is absolutely absurd, because there's nothing random about dreams. You know, they're very, very structured and very, very complex. And they're not like snow on a television screen or static on a radio. Like, those things are complicated. And then also I've seen so often that people have very coherent dreams that have a perfect narrative structure. You know, they're fully developed in some sense. And so that just doesn't, that theory just doesn't go anywhere with me. I just can't see that as useful at all. And so I'm more likely to take the phenomena seriously and say, well, there's something to dreams. Well, you dream of the future and then you try to make it into a reality. That seems to be an important thing. You know, or maybe you dream up a nightmare and try to make that into a reality, because people do that too if they're hell-bent on revenge, for example, and full of hatred and resentment. I mean, that manifests itself in terrible fantasies. You know, those are dreams, then people go act them out. These things are powerful, you know, and whole nations can get caught up in collective dreams. That's what happened to the Nazis. That's what happened to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It was absolutely remarkable, amazing, horrific, destructive spectacle. And the same thing happened in the Soviet Union. The same thing happened in China. It's like, we have to take these things seriously, you know, and try to understand what's going on. So Jung believed that the dream could contain more information than was yet articulated. You think artists do the same thing, you know, like people go to museums and they look at paintings, Renaissance paintings or modern paintings, and they don't exactly know why they're there. You know, I was in this room in New York, I don't remember which museum, but it was a room full of Renaissance art, you know, great painters, the greatest painters, and thought maybe that room was worth $1 billion or something outrageous, because there was like 20 paintings in there, you know, so priceless. And the first thing is, well, why are those paintings worth so much? And why is there a museum in the biggest city in the world devoted to them? And why do people from all over the world come and look at them? What the hell are those people doing? One of them was of the Assumption of Mary, you know, beautifully painted, absolutely glowing work of art. And there's like 20 people standing in front of it looking at it. And you think, what are those people up to? You know, they don't know. Why did they make a pilgrimage to New York to come and look at that painting? It's not like they know. Why is it worth so much? I mean, I know there's a status element to it too, but that begs the question, why do those items become such high status items? What is it about them that's so absolutely remarkable? Well, we're strange creatures. So I was trying to figure out in part, well, where did the information that's in the dream come from? Because it has to come from somewhere, and you could think about it as a revelation, you know, because it's like it springs out of the void and it's new knowledge and it's a revelation. You didn't produce it, it just appears. But that's, see, one of the things I want to do with this series is, like, I'm scientifically minded and I'm quite a rational person, and I like to have an explanation for things that's rational and empirical before I look for any other kind of explanation. And I don't want to say that everything that's associated with divinity can be reduced in some manner to biology or to an evolutionary history or anything like that. But insofar as it's possible to do that reduction, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to leave the other phenomena floating in the air because they can't be pinned down. And in that category, I would put the category of mystical or religious experience, which we don't understand at all. So artists observe one another. They observe people and they represent what they see, and they transmit the message of what they see to us, and they teach us to see. And we don't necessarily know what it is that we're learning from them. But we're learning something, or at least we're acting like we're learning something. We go to movies, we watch stories, we immerse ourselves in fiction constantly. That's an artistic production. And for many people, the world of the arts is a living world, and that's particularly true if you're a creative person. And it's the creative, artistic people that do move the knowledge of humanity forward, and they do that with their artistic productions first. They're on the edge, and the dancers do that, and the poets do that, and the visual artists do that, and the musicians do that, and we're not sure what they're doing. Like, we're not sure what musicians are doing. What the hell are they doing? Why do you like music? You know, it gives you a deep intimation of the significance of things. And no one questions it. You go to a concert, you're thrilled. It's a quasi-religious experience, particularly if the people really get themselves together and get the crowd moving. You know, there's something incredibly intense about it, but it makes no sense whatsoever. It's not an easy thing to understand. Music is deeply patterned, and patterned in layers, and I think that has something to do with it, because reality is patterned and deeply patterned in layers, and so I think music is representing reality in some fundamental way, and that we get into the sway of that and sort of participate in being, and that's part of what makes it such an uplifting experience. But we don't really know that's what we're doing. We just go do it, and it's nourishing for people, right? I mean, young people in particular, lots of them live for music. It's where they derive all their meaning, their cultural identity. Everything that's nourishing comes from their affiliation with their music, and is part of their cultural identity. So that's an amazing thing. The question still remains, where does the information in dreams come from? And I think where it comes from is that we watch the patterns that everyone acts out. We've watched that forever, and we've got some representations of those patterns. That's part of our cultural history.